radio.com. And tonight I have two special guests, and it is Monday, April the 4th, 2015. I have former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, and I have Bruce Campbell, former mercenary. So we're going to be doing a show of how to bring the right and the left together, or whatever you might call it. This is far from one end to another. And so I have the distinct honor of having former Congresswoman, as I say, McKinney and Bruce Campbell. With that said, Cynthia, how are you this evening?
I'm doing fine, Stu, and it's good to be back on the air with you.
Well, it's always my pleasure to have you on. I'm always honored to have you on. You're the only congressperson that I ever met with in person. Nobody else would ever give me the time.
Oh, my goodness.
We had a lot of discussions about a crime syndicate, didn't we?
Alert from Skype.
It sounds like someone might be trying to interfere with the phone here.
That was my computer.
Oh, was it?
I just shut it down, yeah.
And Bruce Campbell, we have you here too, sir. I'm honored to have you on.
Hey, thanks. Good to be with you both.
Now, I just want to bring up one thing and get past it, but you both got burned by Gordon Duff in the past. And we can touch on it or we can leave the subject alone, but that's happened. Now, Cynthia?
Well, Stu, you sent me the link to your last show, which was the show that introduced me to your other guest, Bruce Campbell. And on that show, you said that you were going to deal with the Gordon Duff matter, and then you weren't going to mention it anymore. So now, I just wanted to remind you of what you said in the last show.
Yeah, okay. But I do want to talk about your trip to Libya. Are you willing to talk about that?
Absolutely.
All right, tell us about it.
Well, that was the source of, my problem, but you told the story as accurately as, I told it to you. And, that situation that came as a result of my trip to Libya. But what happened was, the Libyan government had called a meeting that I had been there several times after I went to, I had this series of efforts to try and get into Gaza. And, the first time I went by boat and the Israelis, rammed the boat and, we had to be rescued by the Lebanese. And,
it's on the flotilla, correct? Was that the name of it? The flotilla?
It was, it was the Free Gaza movement that sponsored it. And this was before, this was why they actually began to do flotillas, because the single boat was, extremely vulnerable. And so we did the one boat. The boats had been going and coming back successfully. But when they put me on the boat, then that's when all heck broke loose and the Israelis started, attacking the boats. So the first time they rammed the boat, totally destroyed the boat. It was, then the second time, which was about 6 months after that, we tried again, and that's when the Israelis picked us up, kidnapped us actually. And, I spent 7 days in an Israeli prison. So, of course, this becomes like an international drama, and there are people who are trying, who is this woman who's risking everything to try and get into Gaza? Eventually I did get in with George Galloway, but it was by land, not by sea. So, as a result of this, saga about trying to get into Gaza, the Libyans wanted to meet me. So they invited me to come, and I said, okay, well, I'll come, but I'm not going to come alone because I usually don't do trips like that alone. I said, well, I'll take a delegation with me. So they said, okay. And I took a delegation of people with me, journalists, alternative journalists. And one of them was Wayne Madsen. And,
Wayne's former NSA, correct?
That's right. Former NSA, former naval intelligence. And so, after that, I got another invitation to bring another delegation. You know, they liked having these alternative journalists who would actually write what they saw. And, so I got invited again, and I took another set of journalists, and I took another delegation with me. The purpose of that meeting, of that conference that they were having was slightly different. So I took a different set of people. And so I just happened to have been there in the lead up to what, President Obama had accused the, Jamahariya government, because the government is more than just one person, and the country, of course, is more than one person, of killing their people in Tripoli and in Benghazi. Well, I had just been there, and there was still, because we hadn't resolved a lot of the issues around the conference, there were still thousands of delegates that were there. So I knew that what the United States was saying was a lie. And, so I struggled for months to try and find someone who would finance a trip back to Libya, so that I could take these alternative journalists again, and, they could go out and interview people or do whatever, you know, or just record what the heck was going on, all the bombing that was going on that the United States was leading. And so that's what I did. And what I saw was absolutely outrageous. A country that was totally functioning. It was an economic engine and a source of labor opportunity, employment opportunity for Africans all over the continent. And, they did have an open door policy. So, we met students from all over the continent who were there studying free of charge. And, you know, so anyway, I became very familiar with the, ideological foundation of the government through these trips. But what was more important, I became totally aware of the lies that were being perpetrated on the rest, on the public by the West in the media and the United States. And that was really one of the purposes of organizing finally the delegation of alternative journalists to go there during the bombing. And so we went there during the bombing, and I was there, you know, when the bombing was going on inside Tripoli, around Tripoli. They bombed hospitals, schools, they bombed universities, interestingly, a report on corruption had been carried out by one of the journalists that was against the Jamahariya. He was an opponent. And this journalist carried out an extensive investigation. That the place where the records were held of all of he went all over the world to all of the Libyan embassies and documented the amount of money that was missing, blah, 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 blah. That was one of the places that was bombed too. Just like the mysterious collapse of World Trade Center building number 7 that housed a lot of sensitive information about, the CIA and I think even, and the fact that where the Pentagon was exactly where the records were, that, the trillions of missing of transactions that the details of which were missing were kept. So, there were strategic targets, but the targets all, were about crippling the state. And of course, turning Libya into another Iraq. So basically, when I, was merely on a mission to tell the truth, this article appears in Veterans Today that totally denigrated my effort, denigrated me as an individual, and, was a bunch of lies. So consequently, you're right when you say that I stopped talking to you because, you were associated with this outfit that was, telling a bunch of lies. And I knew personally firsthand that they were lying about Libya. So anyway, Wayne went to Libya with me twice. And I know that you had some interest in talking to Wayne, and I'd be more than happy to set that up because, Wayne is a great investigative journalist. I don't know how he gets away with, the things he writes. In fact, he has had to, move, go underground. He's been threatened just like all the rest of us who try to stand up and tell the truth and, try to create the, United States that the greatest generation fought for, the United States that ought to live up to the ideals that are set forward in the Constitution. Those express the national values, and some of us really believe in those values. And we unfortunately have been saddled and allowed ourselves to become saddled with the kind of leadership that doesn't care anything about the values, doesn't care anything about the Constitution, and doesn't care anything about us. So that's why I asked if, you would allow me to have an interaction, a conversation with Bruce Campbell, because I think he represents, or he and I and you and, we together represent what's right and what's good about this country and the potential of, people from diverse backgrounds being able to come together and try and begin the process of healing our country and resolving our problems.
Well, that's an excellent point. And with that said, Bruce, it's going to be open mic between the two of you. So grab the mic, Bruce.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for those kind words. I'm just in awe of your courage and your experiences and the closeness to disaster that you repeatedly come to tell the truth. I'm really honored to be speaking with you. And of course, I don't consider myself on any opposite political side of you. I think we both seek the truth, and Stu and listeners are all in a truth-seeking crusade or campaign. It's a challenge in this age of lies, but I guess we've always been fed lies ever since I was born, 1946. Everything that American people have been told since before World War II were lies, and that's how we get into these horrible wars and how we support Israel and anyway, it's all because of lies.
Yes.
So I appreciate you so much and the things you've done to dispel those lies and to tell the truth. It's a dangerous business, telling the truth. I don't recommend it. As I told Stu last time, I can't recommend it, but somebody's got to do it, and I guess it falls to people such as ourselves sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and telling the truth or even trying to find the truth, it comes at a personal sacrifice. And I don't know that people really understand or even appreciate the fact that, you suffer, even though there's a reward at the end because you can live with yourself, but you live with yourself in great difficulty. And, those people, I believe the art students, Wayne Madsen was the one who blew the whistle on the art students and exposed it in a story. He was the first one to write about the Israeli art students. Well, they, I'm sure that's who it was, although I don't know for a fact, but, I have had 2 stalkers, and, they, found out where I live, harassed me at my house. It's not difficult to find out where people live, I guess. Harassed me at my house, videotape, me wherever I go. When we were able to get license plate numbers, the license plate doesn't match the vehicle, that kind of thing. And this was during the time of, when they were here and active and going around and videotaping, nuclear sites. They were down in St. Mary in Georgia. We have, a submarine base in St. Mary's, Georgia. And they were down there and in South Georgia on the Atlantic. And, they were there, and they came to my house as well. There were certain telltale factors. And, so I've had that happen 2 different times, 2 different individuals, 2 different persons.
Is this during the period of time that you served in the Congress, or was this after?
One was, during one of my campaigns, and the other one was just, last year. 'Cause they're always afraid or concerned or whatever that I'm going to run. So I always have some problem right around when it would be like election time or when it'd be time to be gearing up. And it's like, I get this problem. So this is just a reminder, yeah, we're still around. We're still there. We're still watching you, kind of thing. And the both times they were from Texas, which is interesting. And I didn't realize that there's some, organizations, and I believe even Stratford is, headquartered in Texas. So I said, okay. The picture is becoming a little clearer now, why the 2 incidents that I had, I'm in Georgia, but the 2 incidents were people who were based in Texas.
They tried to murder you, Cynthia?
I think I've had lots of threats, but I don't think that, I don't think it has reached that level. And I think, well, I can't say that, it's because I'm popular, because Dr. King was popular. Malcolm X was popular. Heck, John Kennedy was popular, and, it didn't stop them. One of the things that I've done academically now is, I've studied, in my undergrad, I studied international relations. In my grad, I studied diplomacy, international relations, and security studies. But I became interested in COINTELPRO. And as a result, I worked on COINTELPRO when I was in the Congress. And now I'm finishing up my PhD. Next time I talk to you, Stu, I will be done. I will be Cynthia McKinney, PhD.
We will
But
call
I've
Dr. Cynthia McKinney.
that's right. They allowed me at Antioch University. They allowed me to continue that interest in COINTELPRO and in targeted assassination. And so the United States government has been involved in horrible, horrible, things that has stunted the growth of and independence of developing countries abroad. And, unfortunately, they've done the same thing here in the United States, which the COINTELPRO papers make perfectly clear.
Well, I had 3 accidents in 1 year, and it was all tied to FBI number 5 in Kansas City, and I can pretty much prove that. The third one was Jackson Stevens' cousin, who was a drug smuggler from Mena, Arkansas, and it was all interrelated. But the ironic part is Mitt Romney's cousin runs COINTELPRO, FBI counterintelligence here in Kansas City. And I got the nice infamous roll over on the freeway at 60 miles an hour. Broke my neck and my back, and then they burned a customer's house to the ground, all in 1 year.
When did that happen, Stu?
2010 through 2011.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then they threatened 2 attorneys right here in Kansas City that wanted to take the deal and collect from the insurance company and sue them. They threatened them, and one of them actually told me who it was. It was the FBI. Threatened that they would kill them or that they would get their licenses.
Well, now, I was recently contacted by Daryl Cherney. I don't know if that name is familiar to you, but he was in a car. He's an environmentalist who was in a car with another woman, a woman by the name of Judy Barry. And basically what the FBI wanted to do was to frame them because they were activists, environmentalists, and make it look like they were going to do a bombing. So they planted a bomb in the car of Daryl Cherney and Judy Barry, and then said that they were going to do the bombing. But actually, when it went to trial, they were actually able to have a free trial, a fair trial. And it was discovered that it was the FBI that planted the bomb. It was going to be a false flag, I guess you would say, a domestic false flag. So this is, of course, something that happened much later than what was chronicled in the COINTELPRO papers. But what's amazing to me is that most of the people in the United States haven't read the COINTELPRO papers, don't know about the excesses of the United States government domestically. And so they tend to believe whatever they're told. And so I think probably the most important thing that people could do is, it's available now on the internet, is to read those papers, and you can see government documents where they're celebrating, trying to destroy people's marriages and, celebrating, creating, rivalry, internecine rivalry, inside organizations, or creating rivalries among organizations with the hope that, chaos and, murder will be the result. And that's exactly what happened. Innocent people have been hurt because the United States is engaged in these activities, including up to and including targeted assassination. And to a large measure, it has stunted even our potential as a country, because every time a leader has been murdered, it allowed a political shift, but that shift was always to the right. That shift was never to the left. But I began to reconsider my political positions, the more deeply I dug into the realities of COINTELPRO, and then, along with COINTELPRO, there was Operation Condor. And then, of course, there was the release of the family jewels. And so you get a picture of U.S. policy. And so then you start to ask the question, well, who's benefiting from this? Because I haven't benefited and my next door neighbor didn't benefit and it really didn't benefit my family. So now on whose behalf is this policy being carried out? Those are the kinds of questions that I began to ask myself. And then, of course, when I actually had the opportunity to serve in Congress, I began to see some of the answers. And that is really what made me realize that there are a whole lot of people that don't benefit from U.S. policy. They don't benefit. And the gulf between what the government is supposed to be and what it actually is, I mean, it's like this huge chasm. And then you take, on my side, I would say, okay, I can't think of it now. Shoot. The siege of the Native American Indian movement.
Are you speaking of the one in South Dakota?
I can't think of the name. Oh my gosh.
Wounded Knee?
Wounded Knee, yeah. So on my side, I look at Wounded Knee, right? And then once you can wrap your brain around that, then you say, okay, then your eyes become a little bit more open to Ruby Ridge and Waco. And so, it's at one point you think it's just us, but it's not just us. They will do it to anybody who gets in their way. And so, and then when Hurricane Katrina, took place and I saw them stripping people of their Second Amendment rights, people who all they wanted was shelter from the floodwaters. And in order to receive shelter, they had to be stripped of their Second Amendment rights. And I said, oh my goodness, there's something very wrong with this picture. And then you had Blackwater patrolling the streets, brought in by Michael Chertoff, of course. And, so I, had a kind of a reawakening about the Second Amendment. And so I think we have to always be in this state of readiness to learn, but also a readiness to accept a new way of thinking about things that we previously, sort of held as truths. And that's another part of the reason that I wanted to explore, like in a conversation with Bruce, because, I went on Bruce's website and there was a lot that I agreed with. I don't know if it was your website, Bruce, or if it was some website that was linked on your website. I can't remember now, or that was a link that would take me to your website. But there was a lot that I agreed with, and I've been trying to reach out to like everybody, like Christian Identity. I don't care, every person in the United States ought to be able to talk to, we ought to be able to talk to each other, and we don't need any go-betweens or in-between people in between for me to be able to talk to Bruce or for, Janet Napolitan. I was extremely offended when she said, well, we need to be afraid of militia. We don't need to be afraid of militia. We need to be talking to the militia. And so anyway, I just have all of these ideas and I just want to hear and let Bruce know that there's somebody else that's, on the completely other, from the other side of the political spectrum, but it's not the same frustrations. We have the same, and I think we also have the same expectations for this country in some areas. And at least in those areas, we need to be able to cooperate.
I'm in agreement
Well, I
with you.
agree. As the late great Russell Means said, "Welcome to the reservation."
That's right.
We're all on it now, you know. And he had the wisdom and the tolerance and the attitude of forgiveness. You know, well, you know, it was our turn first in the barrel. Now it's y'all's turn.
Yeah.
That's where we are. So, no, I don't see us as opposites in any way. I don't care. I've always said, if someone speaks the truth, it doesn't matter who it is. It's still the truth, and that's what we need to hear. My good friend Dmitry Kalazov and I are probably as poles apart as you can get. I mean, an ex-Soviet military guy, and myself, who was an anti-communist. But we see eye to eye on virtually everything. I mean, we may have some political differences, but we don't talk about them. We don't care.
Right.
We're both interested in the truth.
Right.
And I know you are too, and that's all I care about. I want to know the truth. I don't want to be scammed anymore. I've always had a craving to know what's going on, and I kind of like telling people what I find out. So
yes.
I guess we're all the same in that way.
Yes, that's right.
You know, I might add something that is kind of interesting, but you know, you were discussing COINTELPRO, and one of the top chiefs of Hoover, of course, was this fraudster named Ted Gunderson. He was kicked out of the FBI for holding satanic ceremonies in his FBI office, and later they put him into retirement because they diagnosed him as a paranoid schizophrenia. But he had already been diagnosed in 1971 when he started stripping down in front of his daughter and jumping in the pool in front of her and her friends and crazy stuff he was doing. His wife was ready to divorce him, and she finally did. Now he's got two kids, one Lori and Ted Jr., who are also diagnosed paranoid schizophrenia, and they have to take medication. And she had told me, Jocelyn, his wife, told me, back in 2000 when I was being targeted by him, and played friend to me like he did to all the whistleblowers, and he'd get him down on tape, and then he'd turn around and he tried to destroy him for the Bushes, because that's who he was working for. And what's interesting about this guy, I asked him one time, I said, when you were COINTELPRO, working for the FBI, what was the best operation you ever did? And he bragged. He says, sending the love letters to the Black Panthers.
Yes.
I said, what love letters? He says, I sent one love letter. He says, is all it took. And he says, I sent it to, a lower level, a completely separate group of the Black Panthers. And he says, I made it look like it was from one to another. And one was tied to Bobby Seals. And that lawyer, she's a female lawyer, black woman, that's teaching at one of the universities today. But they got accused. What had happened was one of the Black Panthers finds a love letter to his wife, and he's saying, what's this about? And so, the wife's denying it, which was all true. She didn't have an affair with the guy. So they go over to the other guy's house, and what are you doing sending love letters to my wife? Well, they were mad. The guy was mad, and he tied him down to a bed and poured hot water on his private parts and caused the guy a heart attack. Well, they blamed Bobby Seals and this female, I forgot her name, she's a lawyer now, or a law professor. And so I'm in Denver, Colorado, talking to Bobby Seals, where he was speaking at a meeting out there. And I told him about the love letters. He didn't even know why they had arrested him, except they were trying to break him up. He didn't even know, and he says, those love letters are out in such and such in Hollywood or someplace, and some archives they've got. He says, he never understood that, but he says, this makes sense to me now, what had happened. But this is the kind of thing that Gunderson was involved with, and guess who promotes Ted Gunderson lately? Gordon Duff.
I saw that. I heard you, I don't have any background on Gunderson really.
Going jail. I'll tell you one person, Cynthia, is David Hinkson. He owned Water Oz, and they were trying to steal his business, and they set him up on a murder for hire scheme. Matter of fact, right now the judiciary Committee of Congress is looking at this to remove the judge off of the case, who was the one that Gunderson and him and some others to steal the business and put Dave Hinkson in jail. And they got a guy named Roy Swisher, who was actually in that 1997 standoff in Montana, which was a COINTELPRO stooge. And he was in the group all involved in 1994, and we own the Federal Reserve, fooling a bunch of patriots and stealing their money. Fill out this form and pay us $300. Old Boys from Kansas was his game then. And he shows up in this case, and he actually lied and perjured himself like Gunderson did and everybody, and none of the charges stuck except for this one on him. And Dave Hinkson was over in the Ukraine. His passport proves he was in the Ukraine. The judge wouldn't allow that passport to be introduced as evidence. He wouldn't allow any of David's 40 witnesses to be heard by the jurors. They had to step out of the room. I testified even how Gunderson did the same thing, murder for hire scheme on me, by sending the Attorney General a letter saying that he heard that I was trying to kill his partner and associate Tim White by hiring somebody in Denver, which never occurred. And that's the way they would set him up. And this was the old COINTELPRO game. But David Hinkson, they ended up putting the Swisher guy in jail for lying in his case, and all cleared out, and they got him on all these perjury charges of lying in his case and lying about his military record and everything else. And he has already served a year and a half in jail, already out on a 5-year probation, but yet Dave Hinkson sits in a jail cell for 12 years now as an innocent man because of Ted Gunderson wanting to steal his water Oz business. Now, is that concocted deal? Michael Riconosciuto, the Inslaw software, where they took the software, he ratted them out, they wanted to change the Hamilton's family software, the prosecutor's software, turn it into something that they did with E-Systems, Daddy Bush's company, where they can take these satellites and they can actually, the software, actually twist sound and light in midair. So they've been able to do some of their really sophisticated stuff with it. But the Inslaw, Riconosciuto had ratted him out on this. And he was part of Gunderson's little FBI group out there in Los Angeles. And he set him up on a meth lab. He has served 22 of 23-year sentence illegally. They've kept him in. He gets out next year, folks, and he's going to be talking. These are the kind of things that COINTELPRO Gunderson was involved with. Those are examples that I've just cited.
I think it's important for us to talk about COINTELPRO. I just finished writing probably 400 pages, 300 of which are the actual dissertation itself, and I have probably another 150 or so in the appendix of supporting documentation. And I went through every one of the WikiLeaks documents that mentioned Hugo Chavez. There were over 2,000 of them. And I read every one of them because my dissertation's on the leadership and the legacy on race of Hugo Chavez. And I just have to wonder if we, who gets added to the list. The church committee came out with Patrice Lumumba, Fidel Castro. They mentioned several that had been captured the interest of the CIA in terms of assassination attempts. They never, acknowledged that anyone actually was killed as a result of this interest. But it strikes me mighty strange that you would have 7 Latin American leaders all come down with cancer at the same time. It's just like Hugo Chavez talked about his cancer and the anomaly of so many people who were in leadership positions who also were more independent in their ideological stances. wanted separation from the United States hegemony, and they ended up with cancer. So, you know, if it's our tax dollars, we deserve to know how the tax dollars are being spent. I just posted something on my Facebook page where you've got billions of dollars lost. I put lost in quotation marks, of course, in Afghanistan, more billions of dollars lost in Iraq. This is since I was in Congress, all of this has happened. So you're talking, you know, tens of billions of dollars in transactions that they can't track. It's not that they were lost. It's just they don't want to tell us who got the money. And then I don't know if you've had the opportunity to interview Catherine Austin Fitts. Have you interviewed her?
Catherine has been a good friend of mine for years. Matter of fact, when I caused those HUD congressional investigations back in 1990 over the Denver crowd,
yeah,
she was appointed as a result of that as the Assistant Secretary of HUD to come in and clean it up. And then years and years later, she comes to me and Al Martin asking for help in the 1990s because she had left. And of course, she went into that private partnership deal where Al Gore had set up as vice president, to where if you could show how to save the government money, that they would pay you a percentage of that first savings. And she did within HUD and Irving Associates. She went after, which was the Millman crowd out of Denver again. Well, they smashed her up.
They surely did.
I know her well, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, like I was saying, I posted on my Facebook page, you got all these billions of dollars that are being frittered away. And whatever happened to discussions about infrastructure investment? I mean, you know, it's like we don't even talk about it anymore. We don't talk about investing in our seniors. We want to steal from them. We don't talk about investing in in our future, which is the education of young people. We don't talk about it. We try to steal from them as well. Everything is stealing from the taxpayer and delivering nothing in return, and then saying, oh, that's privileged information. You can't know that. And that's privileged information. You can't know that. And it's as if the people don't even have a right to do anything except fork over whatever little disposable income they have left. And they don't even have a right to know how it's spent. I'm like totally fed up.
You're very correct about that. You know, Cynthia, I watched the General Accounting Office because they were the one of the few that over the years, you know, would look at my stuff where nobody else would. And of course, they have no prosecutorial role. But, you know, that was the ones that fed the Congress and the Senate the information. And I watched those General Accounting Office numbers where 1% was in control in 1981 of 20% of the economy straight across the board. And then by 1995, it grew supernaturally during the 1980s and into the early 90s and watched it get up to 50% and all that. And then I saw the number come out in June of 2012 that said that 400 men were in control of 95% of the U.S. economy, straight across the board, and that they were making more money per year than half of the U.S. population of the 330 million, and they were making more money per year personally than that bottom lower totem pole of half the people. I said, my God, it can't be done. 400 men cannot do that in 30 years without all this theft and deception. And I've always followed the money trail, and it keeps coming back to Daddy Bush, Millman, Mizell, Kissinger, Rockefeller, Rothschild, Anwar Ben-Shiri, the 12 disciples of Satan, Grace, Pope Benedict, Warburg, Patrick Wu. And what's amazing about all these people is 9 of them live inside the United States and operate here. Meyer Rothschild, they're all the 12, they call them. And this 12 crime syndicate members are the ones I've done the money trail on that are doing all the robbing and looting. And they're APEC directors. If you take Brownstein, Millman's attorney, one of the, 12, and Daddy Bush's, and Millman owned, my ex-in-law, Silverado and all that, where Neil was, to relate to the people here, where he was director. If you look at their APEC directorship, Mizell, their other stooge, Norman Brownstein, they call him the 101st Senator, APEC director, the Simon Wiesenthal, the cell out of Denver, the ADL, the list goes on. And who's controlling APEC money is controlling, better than half the Congress and Senate now. And I look at this. This is where it needs to be stopped. These people have robbed and looted between savings and loan, HUD, the Resolution Trust Corp, and bank bailout. They've destroyed this nation. And I can put my fingers on $100 trillion worth of real estate here in America that they own. They own 8 out of 10 shopping malls. They own 8 out of 10 high-rises. Remember back in the 80s, the Japanese are buying up America? No, those were the foreign trusts they were setting up. And the Rose Law Firm was creating those foreign trusts and passing them up to Denver, to Norman Brownstein. And it comes back to the 6 CIA council that was underneath George Herbert Walker Bush when he was CIA director, Natoli and Brownstein and the other 4. And I can point the finger right where the assets are. The problem that I see, and I've always maintained, is they've had every attorney general since 1981 in their control. If you look at Holder, what he just did, $70 million a year job with J.P. Morgan. In case you're unaware, Cynthia, and I think you are because I don't think you heard this, but I was told 2 weeks ago, I made it on a broadcast sometime last week, that Leonard Millman, that's hiding out in Cuba and laundering money, faked his death here in the U.S., and that Larry Mizell, his partner that created this $100 trillion worth of mortgages and nearly $5,000 trillion they're estimating worth of derivatives backed by these mortgages, that they were going to get presidential pardons. I was told this, and it was going to be done in secret, that Obama was going to give it to them, and these were 2 that they were buying for $1 billion each. And then what would happen was that you would see the Senate suddenly, who's been holding up the confirmation of Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, holding up hers based on an abortion bill, something to do with the abortion bill, that as soon as Barack Obama signed those, the abortion bill would go through, she would be confirmed, Holder would step down, and Obama would announce that he got a private little donation to his new future presidential library. That all happened in one day. They made the announcement that he got $100 million in a private dinner in donations for his presidential library last week. That all went down. Now, he violated the law because you can't give a presidential pardon to somebody who hasn't been indicted. You can't do that to obstruct justice. And if they haven't been indicted yet, which they haven't been, and all this, that makes you a and another thing with a presidential pardon, you're supposed to turn away from any association of any of the past activities, criminal activities. They haven't. That makes President Barack Obama a co-conspirator to every crime that they have been involved with all these years. Now, I mean, this is what I see. How can we change this? The Attorney General of the United States, that 50 underneath them at the very top, have to be cleaned out to get justice for this country.
Well, another thing that is happening is, and maybe there's a connection between those people who I would consider to be the old guard and then the new guard that's coming in. But the United States now is, I would say, post 2008 and the bank bailout is like the Soviet Union was under Gorbachev. And when Yeltsin came in, all of the state assets were basically given away for a song. And the situation in Russia was that only one set of people had money. So when these assets came up for sale, nobody had money to buy them except the one. Of course, we know this was all sort of orchestrated, and the Harvard University Foundation served as advisors in this whole process. But basically, it was the fleecing of the people of Russia, and the same thing is happening here. And it's like the chairs on the Titanic it's like musical chairs. And so now we've got a new set of people who are becoming oligarchs in the United States. So we're creating oligarchs here. And all we have to do really is just look at what happens in these other countries. And I don't know why, some people didn't expect that it was going to happen here, that if they would do it to them, to those people over there, that they wouldn't do it to these people over here. And there was always this veneer of impenetrability that, it can happen, in the black communities and the brown communities, because basically that's what Catherine Austin Fitts recognized, was that the black community was being fleeced. And she blew the whistle on it and got into serious trouble when she began to teach people how to track the federal dollars that were going out of, first of all, their communities, and then coming into the community. And so another reason for the outreach really is because I've always maintained that anything that happens in the black community is going to eventually happen in the white community. And sure enough, it was like much to my horror when I saw the two women who were being body cavity searched on the street in Texas, on the highway, on the road in Texas. And of course, this was a problem that had been happening with the black community, black and brown community in Texas for a long time. And there was one particular attorney in Texas who was fighting it. And they eventually got rid of him, but he was fighting it with all of his heart. And then, you driving down the street and all of a sudden there's a roadblock and they want your DNA. They're taking DNA swabs. Now, this was something that was common, still is, in the black community, that they take DNA swabs, but now the roadblock would catch white people too. And so, what is going on in this country? Which leads me to Jade Helm 15. What is this? I've been looking at the reports that people are putting up on the internet, on YouTube. I don't know if they're right or not, but I can tell you that I personally have seen tanks rolling down the streets in Atlanta, Georgia. What the heck is a tank doing in Atlanta, Georgia? And why did we have to have Blackwater troops patrolling the streets in New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina? I mean, what's going on? And the idea, they say, okay, well, we want to be able to blend into the community, and there will be people who will they'll be in civilian clothes and driving civilian cars. Well, they're already doing that. I mean, that's what COINTELPRO was all about. And the illegal operation of the military inside the United States, of course, Posse Comitatus, we know how it started. But we also know that there's not supposed to be military operation inside the United States. What does it mean now when you've got a war drill going on, a military drill going on inside on the streets of the United States? I mean, This is, and in several states, this is like you never, I don't think, people in their wildest dreams would ever have thought that they would see the military rolling down the street. And I cannot in honestly believe that people are okay with this.
I agree. I think everybody, just about everybody, regardless of your political persuasion, would have to view Jade Helm, the idea of it, as treason. It's against the American people, no matter who you are, and it's got to be treated as treason. It's got to be seen, and I think it is being seen that way. There's maybe some fear because it's so blatant and so ugly. But to answer or to address your statement or your observation, I think we can see now that so much of the police departments, so many of the police departments, especially the big ones, are being trained by Israeli instructors either in Israel or in this country. And we're all being treated like Palestinians or like American Indians now or like anybody else has been oppressed in this country. There have been a bunch. Now it's our turn of the barrel, you say?
Yes.
Whites are always the ultimate enemy of the establishment. I guess there's just no getting around it. I mean, everybody has his turn in the barrel. American Indians got it first, and the damn country was founded on slavery, both white and black. I mean, slavery was the engine of this country. Every one of the 13 colonies had slavery, either white or black. They were founded on it. And so we've just got to face the facts. America is not a nice country. Hold on one second. I got some people walking by. Go ahead.
Okay. And the thing about it is, but the propaganda is 100%. Because if you go anywhere in the world, where do people want to come? They want to come to the United States because the United States represents democracy. And they believe that their country ought to be should strive to be like the United States because the United States represents democracy. And, so, we wish that democracy prevailed in the United States. In my own final campaign for Congress, people all over the state of Georgia cast their votes either for or against me. But I wasn't running all over the state of Georgia. I was only running in one congressional district. And a lawsuit was filed to try and understand how those votes were counted. And so the effort was to try and get the access to the election data. And in the courtroom, the expert witness for the state of Georgia said, well, you just have to trust that the person that we say got the most votes is the actual winner of the election.
Cynthia, they wanted you out of there because you were really hammering on 911. You were hammering on them about the military exercises that were going on. I want you to talk about that. I mean, you were the famous one, the way they did you up in public, because you had a change of a hairdo, and some guard comes up and grabs a hold of you, assaults you, and you took your purse, and you didn't know who it was, and you swung it over your shoulder, as I recall seeing in the video. Tell them what happened.
Well, honestly, here's the thing. I had been harassed the entire time. What I did not realize, what I did not understand was that I had become targeted by the white Capitol Hill police officers because I had come to the defense of the black Capitol Hill police officers who to this day have several outstanding lawsuits that have never been addressed alleging racial discrimination. And one particularly egregious event had occurred. The black, with the use of the N-word, and the black police officers came to members of the Congressional Black Caucus and asked for help. I wrote a letter asking for the resignation of the offending officer. That offending officer was promoted, and at the time of my serial incidents, because I had many incidents, at the time of of those serial incidents, this gentleman was the counsel for the Capitol Hill Police. So, of course, none of this came out at the time, but some of the black Capitol Hill police officers went on, they did a video, and they reminded me that I was the one that wrote the letter in their defense. And that's why it was impossible in my understanding for them to not know who I was as the youngest black woman on the Hill. I didn't look like the other women. I didn't dress like the other women. So it's impossible for them to not recognize me. But, it wasn't about even though it was their job to recognize me, that wasn't what was going on. I was being targeted, and I never really understood that. Nobody helped me or pulled my coattail, as they say, to let me know you've been targeted until after that incident occurred.
And Cynthia, can we hold it right there? That's a perfect example, and I want you to carry this over. I know you got jet lag, and you said you give me 1 hour, but you're on a roll, and I want to talk about this and interact here with Bruce, but we need to do a station identification. And this is Stu Webb, and this is the VeteransTruthRadio.com. And folks, I want to point out that we have a matching contributor. We have someone, a couple, who has agreed to match, say, that if we can get $5,000 raised in, I think we have 23 or 24 more days, we've raised $1,700 of the $5,000, they will match that $5,000, which will give us all the software, the balance of what we need to set up our TV network here on this radio network. And we have more hosts. If you haven't seen our new host that we have several. We have a couple more coming aboard soon. And Cynthia, even you have indicated in the fall, possibly, you want a slot here yourself. Is that correct?
Yes, I've talked to you about it. And I also wanted to say thank you. And I hope that the listening audience will take the time and make a donation, because I want to say that you have really been a friend to me. And, you know, in the world of politics, friends are hard to come by. And, in fact, you know, you don't have friends, because even the people around you that you think are your friends, it's easy to find a knife in their hand.
They come in all kinds of shapes, colors, and
yeah.
The devil walks around very strange. It looks good at times, sounds good.
Yeah, and you know, even when it comes to people that you think you love, or people that love you, I guess that's why you know, it's treacherous in the world of politics, and also in the world of truth telling too. But, you know, with my studies in the COINTELPRO is that, you know, Operation Gladio, I tell the audience that to please go back to, go on YouTube and look up BBC Operation Gladio. They did an excellent documentary on Gladio. And the thing that's so interesting about Gladio is that the organizations that, like the Red Brigades, the founders, the original activists in the Red Brigades were all in prison. When all of the bombing and stuff that was done under the name of the Red Brigades, that was the CIA actually carrying it out in their strategy of tension. So we must understand what our government has done so we can get prepared for what might be coming down the pike.
Very good point. Let's go with the song real quick, Cynthia. Give us all a break here to go get a cup of coffee, and we'll be right back in about 3 minutes, folks. Does that sound good, Cynthia?
Sounds fine.
Okay. I'm on VeteransTruthRadio.com, and my special two guests that I'm honored to have on is former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. We'll be calling her a doctor here soon, Dr. McKinney, and Bruce Campbell, American Defense Party, and former mercenary in Rhodesia, and a writer, and we're all sharing in common what we have as Americans. And I'm going to let you pick it up, Cynthia. And Bruce,
well, you know,
why?
I'm just darn talking too much. I want to have a conversation with Bruce.
Bruce,
I like listening to you. I really enjoy hearing you. When we've been in this thing for a long time, we tend to think we've heard it all. But I watched an interview with you on Press TV. I've watched it more than twice. It's so fascinating with that Marzia.
Oh, yes.
And you explained to her and the viewers about the pledge that you were asked to give. And I guess it was in your first term, or
yes,
maybe running for the first term. I don't remember exactly when that happened. But it was so fascinating. And you, I guess, explained that that's changed in later years, that you write your own pledge now. But I'd love for you to tell people again, because it's so illustrative, what we're up against in this country now.
Yes, the situation is extremely dire. And, peeling this back is very much like trying to peel an onion. And when you get down into the meat of that onion, it makes you cry. And, for people who love freedom and love liberty and love this country, it ought to make them cry when they begin to peel back the way in which this particular special interest, all special interests in one sense, but this one, because it's loyal to another country, the way it has just insinuated itself inside the body politic like a cancer, like a virus. Well, I guess they say cancer is a virus, a form of a virus or something. Well, that is the situation. What happened to me was, I get a fax and it was from AIPAC. AIPAC is across the top. I'm running for the first time in my life in Congress, of course, for Congress. And, I don't know what AIPAC is. I only recently found out what a Zionist was, So I didn't know, it had on the fax, it had, that they wanted me to pledge the military superiority of Israel, continued aid at the, requested level. Jerusalem is the capital city. And, there were several other things, which I can't remember now. 5 or so items on the letter, on the fax. And I said no. And, that's when the torture began. it was like Chinese water torture. So what happened was and I really wasn't saying no because I was antagonistic. I was just saying, I don't really, have, full possession of the facts when it comes to this issue. And I need to do my research so I can understand what would best serve my constituents. That is all I said. I really wasn't trying to be, anything other than responsible. For that reason, I declined to sign it. But then what I discovered was the invisible web that connects all of the Washington, D.C. money. And this is what makes it so formidable. And this is why now there may not be a pledge, but you'll see on every candidate's website some position on Israel, which is the same thing. It's the same thing as signing the pledge. And I found out that women's organizations, I'm a woman, but the women's organizations were all laughing at my candidacy. Of course, I didn't have any money. I didn't raise any money. I didn't know how to raise money. When I did get some instruction, they gave me the Fortune 500 book for the state of Georgia and told me to call the CEOs and ask them for a campaign contribution. I'm a Democrat. And that's what the Democrats told me to do. And then, of course, that helped me to realize that there's very little difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. At the very top, they would love to have people at the grassroots level fighting each other dearly, because this one is a Democrat and that one is a Republican. And it's like, I wear red and you wear green and there's no way we can get together. And, but at the top, they wear both red and green. That's what I learned. And they're all feeding from the same private trough, which is actually a public trough, because when you lobby and get tax breaks, then the money that you would have paid to put in the till for investment in the United States, well, that doesn't happen. It goes into campaign coffers, and a portion of it goes to campaign coffers, and they get magnified amounts back, is the way it works. Well, anyway, the women's organizations, I couldn't get support. The environmental organizations, I couldn't get support. Here I was, a member of the Sierra Club when I first ran for Congress, and I couldn't even get the endorsement of the Sierra Club. I eventually got it, but I had to fight for it. And it was because I hadn't signed the pledge. Peace organizations. I had infuriated my colleagues in the Georgia legislature because I had spoken out against George Bush's war in Iraq, and I stayed up all night looking at that. It looked like fireworks. It was so beautiful. But my heart was breaking because it was bombs dropping and I couldn't go to sleep. And so I was in the Georgia legislature at the time. I asked for a point of personal privilege so I could speak about what I had witnessed overnight. And when I got to the part of my remarks where I said George Bush ought to be ashamed of himself, my colleagues, Democrats, as well as Republicans, because it doesn't make much difference down here in Georgia, got up and walked out on me. So I had some bona fides when it came to being a peace candidate. So I go to the peace organizations up in DC asking for help, financial help, endorsement, just even endorse me. Couldn't get an endorsement. So the peace organizations, environmental organizations, women's organizations, all tied up. I'm sure a whole lot more of them. But those were the ones that should have helped me and didn't. And then I talked about that Chinese water torture. Like, I'd get a call and the person would say, I want to do a fundraiser for you. And this would be, like somebody who was like somebody. I had one comedian call me and say he wanted to do a fundraiser for me. And so I'm all excited and everything. And we start planning and everybody is happy around, my volunteers, which I only had a few, but we were happy because here was finally somebody who wanted to support my campaign. And then, 2 weeks later, they called me and said, have you signed the pledge? And I said, no, I haven't. Well, I can't do that fundraiser. Click, hang up the phone in my face. And that happened on several occasions. One occasion, I had asked for, I wanted to do this event, Tea with Tipper, two Southern women, because I'm proud of my Southern background. And, canvas your inventory of houses big enough and grand enough to have such an event. And, the list was very small, but I get somebody who volunteers to have the event at her place. The invitations go out. Everything is set. Literally hours before Tipper would get on the plane headed to Atlanta, I get a demand from the hostess saying, we need you to write a statement. What? Write a statement? You didn't sign the pledge. And it's like, I said, okay, I will, I learned from that experience that even if it meant extortion, they would do that. I vowed, well, I will never put myself in that position again. But I've learned politics from this group of folk. But one of the things that I've learned also is that they can be beaten. I mean, when it comes to just, brains versus brains, that's not a difficult one. But the problem is that we don't have the brawn. When we beat them with our brains, then they come with their political muscle, their brawn. And that's what I didn't have. I didn't have brawn. So, it was the Durban World Conference Against Racism. And, I had asked the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus to put me in charge of the task force on, the World Conference. And the whole issue erupted around, well, we can't talk about Zionism. And so now, okay, I have issues that I'm trying to deal with around racism, and I'm supposed to forget about those issues and just humbly say, okay, and accept the injustices that come my way because you don't want to have a discussion about Zionism. And that was not just me. That's the whole world. Everybody in the whole world is supposed to shut up and not participate in the conference because certain folk at the conference wanted or might to have a discussion about Zionism. And I said, this is wrong. But that's when I learned that there's folk who play a good game. They put up a front, they put up a face. Oh, they're so this, they're so that. They can raise their fist, they can shake their hand, but they cower when that particular lobby speaks. They become the biggest cowards I've ever seen. Men who are cowardly. They duck and dodge. And that's why I've lost so much respect for John Kerry because, you know, he's a tall man. So I guess, you know, a lot of times you think tall people, you know, have backbone, but, his back is continuously bent since he's been Secretary of State. I mean, you know, it was bent long before that. And I know that there's a lot of history on him that I'm not totally familiar with, but I think it's so clear. I mean, only those people who are just not looking don't see how bent over John Kerry is. He's lost, in my opinion, lost all of his dignity, whatever dignity he had left after his campaign. He's lost it all now as Secretary of State. Hillary, I mean, these people ought to be brought up on charges. They ought to be facing charges like the 6 police officers in Baltimore. The whole slew of them. So I've adopted the jury nullification. I'm not going to send some nonviolent, offender, somebody who, had the mishap of getting stopped because he had a suspended license or, he, had a marijuana or something in his possession. And I'm not going to send him to prison when you've got this mass killing going on, in the name of U.S. policy. What kind of justice is that? There's no justice at all. So anyway, and so this time that I took out to do my, research for my PhD, I had to do something. And so, I went to Libya, came back from Libya, went on a tour, and at the end of my tour, telling people what I saw in Libya, I ended up in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and I started this PhD program. And I didn't work. I lived out of my savings, which are depleted now. And I studied. I studied about myself. I studied about leadership. I studied about my country and what I personally could do to be a better leader. And so the PhD will be in leadership and change, because Lord knows we need change and we need leadership. So I don't know, like when I actually graduate, what comes after, but, how to best utilize it. But I needed the time to, investigate myself, to see where I was in this whole process of being so publicly damaged and humiliated and caricaturized as if, I don't have a brain. Of course, it's impossible, to have a brain. You're a Black woman. It's impossible for you to speak to power. You're a Black woman. You can't do that. and not speak the way that I spoke to them. And then I look at myself on the YouTube videos and I say, oh my goodness, no wonder no wonder they didn't want me up there. It was from Madeleine Albright to Colin Powell to Michael Chertoff to the only thing I regret to Susan Rice to I called them all on the carpet because they all were doing things that were wrong. And the Congressman Walter Jones, he at least touched me because he took affirmative action to apologize for believing the hype in the beginning of the Iraq War. He's the one that came up with the French fries being American fries or whatever freedom fries, I think. And when he learned that the Bush administration had told all those lies to take our country to war, and he understood that we were actually fighting war for another country, he hand wrote letters of condolence to the family members of our soldiers who were killed in Iraq. He felt it that deeply that he had betrayed them because he himself had been betrayed, and he wanted to set it right. So,
I don't know, whoever suggested this, you don't have a brain. I mean, you've distinguished yourself time and time again in your actions. I think the problem Americans have with regard to Israeli power, you stop and think about it, is that America was founded on extermination and slavery. That's really the basis for the whole sad story. Yeah, the whites, they're high in technology, low in morality, I've found. They don't have a monopoly on it, obviously, but they've really failed in the courage department, going to war against each other twice in the 20th century, going to war against each other in the 19th century. With sadism, I mean, when I take the trouble sometimes to read about World War II, especially the bombings, the mass murder, I really sometimes regret that I was even born. It's a shocking legacy. You learn about the extermination of the American Indians. You learn about the realities of slavery. I don't think anybody can call me a right-winger with that attitude. I just, the truth is a bitter pill to swallow, but nevertheless, you have distinguished yourself so utterly. Every chance you've had, you've done the right thing, and it took a lot of guts, and my hat's off to you.
My father told me when I first got elected in the Georgia legislature, my dad told me politics is a man's world, but they put their pants on just like you do. So that was, his way of telling me, you might be one of a few, but they're just like you in the end. And I found that to be very true. And but unfortunately, much to my detriment, I found it to be too true. And so it was easy for me to speak up. I had some some, um, funny incidents like when I did speak up. I don't hesitate to ask questions. And I'm on the transportation committee. This is when I'm in the Georgia legislature. And they're talking about the issue was allowing those longer trucks to come on Georgia roads, the 53-foot trailers. And they were talking about axle this and axle that and axle this and axle that. Well, that just wasn't a part of my parlance, so I didn't know what an axle was. So I raised my hand and I said, Mr. Chairman, what's an axle? And everybody just laughed at me, then they explained it, and then, it was, I could understand it, but it was just, I just have this nature. I ask questions and I didn't really, like look up to those people. But I probably should have. This is what allowed me then, plus my outrage at the sheer incompetence and the evilness as well as the corruption. Because, Donald Rumsfeld was getting, first of all, he had the Tamiflu, Tamiflu stockpile at that time. The Pentagon had purchased Tamiflu, and he was a owner of the stock, right? Of the company. So I said, that's a conflict of interest. I was wondering what other conflicts of interest were going on. And so, Michael Chertoff did not leave his home in the early part of the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. He didn't have the sense to know that he needed to get his behind up out of the bed and go and take care of his responsibility as Secretary of Homeland Security, which of course I voted against. It never came to a vote, a roll call vote. It was only passed on a voice vote, and I voted no. I was too young in the game to know that I should have called for a roll call vote. So my no vote could have been recorded. But I've always had this instinct from my dad, who, gave me the background to know that this stuff was wrong. How in the world are we going to create a whole new department because something happened that didn't really have to happen, that they don't want to explain to us what it was that actually happened? They didn't want to tell us what happened. They didn't want to do an investigation. I'm talking about 911 now. But yet they want to create a whole new government department with all of that means. It's ridiculous. And now Homeland Security, it's the seat of all evil. If I were back in Congress, I'd have to defund it. What do we need a Department of Homeland Security for? I'd have to defund a lot of aspects of the government now that I'm a little bit wiser.
Bruce, you want to pick that up?
Well, again, we get back to the Israeli connection. Everybody in Homeland Security or whoever started the damn thing was either an Israeli citizen or a toady or an agent. So we get back to the same thing. And again, the problem that Israel knows that how do you criticize genocidal government in so-called Israel when you come from a genocidal government yourself? What American can criticize Israel with our early history and the history of the 20th century wars and what's going on in the Middle East today? So, well, it could be argued, Israel is directing American policy. And I guess in the larger sense, that's true, but it's being directed out of New York. I mean, Hillary Clinton, when she gave that inane talk at the Washington, D.C. office of the Council on Foreign Relations, I mean, she's a clown. She said, well, it's good to be here at the new D.C. office of the Council on Foreign Relations. And she was Secretary of State at the time. And she said, now we don't have to go to New York to the mothership to be told how to think. That was on national television. It's on YouTube. You can see her say it. So this is what we're confronted with. And the only way, I mean, there's no peaceful, there's no legal, there's no systematic way to save ourselves in our humiliation of being run by these monsters. It's been, since 1921, since this Council on Foreign Relations was formed, but the same guys, the Dulles brothers, Colonel House, Robert Lansing, the same guys were the advisors for Woodrow Wilson starting in 1913. So it's been 102 years since these psychopaths have been running America with no responsibility. They got total power and no responsibility. Now, and again, well, more and more often you see them on television. Well, so-and-so from the Council on Foreign Relations is here tonight to give us a viewpoint, or her viewpoint, on the Middle East situation. Well, who the hell? The first time I saw that, a representative of the Council on Foreign Relations as an expert, I was floored. I couldn't believe anybody would have the gall to come out show that this private ministry of war is actually making American policy, both foreign, mainly foreign, of course, that's why it's called the Council on Foreign Relations, and domestic. They run the show, as Hillary Clinton incredibly admitted in that on television, on C-SPAN. So you can see it. I mean, anybody who thinks I'm dreaming, you can just look it up.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
I saw it.
Hillary Clinton is batshit crazy, criminally insane. That's the only words I can use for that woman. As bad as Jeb Bush, all criminally insane. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Well, then, I guess our time is almost up. So the question is, well, what do we do about it? And I think these kinds of conversations where we come together is what we do about it. We come together in an informed kind of brotherhood and sisterhood, where I know Bruce's heart, Bruce knows my heart. I might say something, I might use the wrong words. Well, I don't care about the wrong words if I've connected to your heart, right? You don't care if I use the wrong words if you've been able to connect to my heart. And so that we need a little bit more of that. We need a whole lot more of that, actually. I've tried to create that kind of space on my Facebook page where, people can say anything they want to say, almost. Can say, I get the trolls. I get rid of the trolls. But take a tough topic and say, okay, let's have at it. And see what we can come up with when people hear, through reading in this instance, but when people can hear each other. I've been as a Southerner, I know, Bruce, I don't know where you're from. Where are you from?
Well, originally, I'm sorry to say Illinois, then California.
Oh, okay. Well, as a Southerner,
real Copperhead.
Oh, okay. I can tell you that I've seen people change. So I know that change is possible. I know that people can go inside themselves and come out better. So, why not let's give ourselves the opportunity to do that? Honestly, I think that's why John Edwards came under such attack. Because as a Southerner, he understood, he understood the things that you're talking about tonight, Bruce. He got it as a Southerner. And I think that was a part of his heart. But, unfortunately, I can't make any excuse for, the other part of it, what men always seem to fall for. And honey bait is out there. I mean, for whatever reason, those people who set people up, they know that's the kind of thing that works.
Yep.
And so I think this was all an effort to neutralize him, in the use of the FBI word in the COINTELPRO documents, to neutralize the political possibilities for John Edwards. I really, really believe that, because I have confidence in Southerners, in Southerners in particular, who have been through the struggles of the South.
Yes, and in my opinion, we have to face facts. We have to abandon this federal system, which has been our undoing from the very beginning. It was a fraud on the people. When Alexander Hamilton and George Washington set up this, and he wasn't a Federalist, but Hamilton, of course, was the head of it, but Washington went along. They set up this obscene, privately run central government and a privately owned central bank.
Yes.
That's exactly what we have today. It's all done by corporations, both the bank and the government. I mean, I've read, and it's hard to conceive of this, but so many of the federal departments are actually corporations headquartered in Puerto Rico. And what the heck is that? But that's privatization. That's what Hamilton started with the first bank of the United States. But to have a central bank, a private central bank that enriches its stockholders, you have to have a central government to enforce it.
Yes.
And that's what these guys gave us. So that's got to be examined. It's got to be abandoned. We got to go back to the Articles of Confederation, Perpetual Union. You have respect for everybody, but you can't take us to war. You can't take our money. You can't kill us legally. And that's all the Southerners wanted. I mean, slavery was British law. That's the way it was, and it could have been done away with peacefully. But Lincoln, who actually hated black people, Lincoln wanted war, and that was the end of this so-called experiment. We never recovered from this catastrophe. So we have to examine this. We have to abandon the federal system of a president, a Supreme Court, and two houses of the Congress. I mean, you only need one house of Congress, and that's when the state representatives get together and air their grievances. But you can't give power like this to people. You can't have a president, because there's always going to be a dictator. It was a dictator from the beginning with George Washington when he used the militia to put down the Whiskey Rebellion. Alexander Hamilton, he wanted those farmers in western Pennsylvania to pay back his cronies in England for the war debt. So he taxed the alcohol. And they said, no, that's not fair. You're singling us out. So Hamilton and Washington sent the militia in to put down these. And America was founded on a tax rebellion. And how do these guys justify doing that right out of the box? As soon as they get power, now they're like King George. So we have to examine where we went wrong, and we went wrong from the very beginning. So we got to get back. For 8 years we had the Articles of Confederation, Perpetual Union, and it was probably the greatest 8 years in American history. Not from the slaves' point of view, definitely not from the Indians' point of view, but as far as harmony amongst the governed, they didn't have any power over people the way they do now, and the way they did as soon as the Constitution was brought in 1789. So I just urge people to think about this.
Well, we definitely have got to start thinking about ways in which we can dismantle institutional structures that we have now. And, some things they're dismantling things, but not in the correct way. And some things we just need to walk away from. We need to be able to have these frank discussions. And I think in my circle, but now I don't know what's going on outside of my circle, but I think the Federal Reserve is something we can all agree on. That's something too,
Yeah. If you explain it, it becomes a easily understood scam. But if you don't explain it, nobody knows what's going on.
Right. That's right. And so, I think if we have these discussions and start thinking about what we have in common, we'll find out we got a lot in common. And the one thing I know, and they wrote it in the COINTELPRO papers, the one thing they don't want to happen is black folk and white folk to come together and start talking to each other. That's what they don't want to happen. They wrote that in the COINTELPRO papers.
That's right.
So I say, okay, let's do it. Let's do it.
Yep.
Well, we're going to do it right here as often as you want to do this, Cynthia, and as often as Bruce wants to.
Yes.
And we can bring different ones on. Whatever you want to do, you can do it every week with me. I'll give you an evening.
Well, I know you're talking to Bruce now.
I'm talking to both of you.
Every week is a little bit too much for me because, now I'll be on the other side of the planet in about 2 weeks.
I do give respect to the black community out here, black America, for their right for standing up on these police shootings as an example. And we can go a few more minutes. I don't have a host behind me here. And so we can carry this over for a few minutes. But I respect the black community for standing up and saying no more of these police murders. I think Chip Tatum had mentioned that he said that there were 350 since the first of the year, as of last month, the end of the month. And they're not justified. Murdering people in the streets of America are not justified. And,
that's right.
It's out of control.
It is out of control. And I guarantee you what Senator Frank Church announced when he, was going through the findings after they had written everything up and investigated everything. The one thing that was clear was that the tactics and strategies that the United States government had used abroad against other people, they used those same strategies and tactics at home against the American people. So we have to care about what our country does, what our government does in our name with our tax dollars to other people. We got to care about it, but then we got to beware, because we also know from history that they will not hesitate to use those same tactics at home against us.
Exactly right. They're ready to go to nuclear war with Russia. These maniacs running our government. They're ready. They're preparing to go to war. It's a Jewish problem that we're up against, because these people have the demented idea that life will go on. Yeah, it'll be a little tough, but we'll win. and life will go on. Well, no, it may not go on. I mean, look at the whole nuclear bombing industry. Einstein, Oppenheimer, Teller, Cohen. This is their distinguishing achievement, is this mass death. This is what we're up against. We have to overthrow these people. I'm willing to go nuclear war.
I agree, and I'm not willing to spend, not one penny more of the public purse to kill somebody else. Just not willing to do it.
I'm in agreement with you. Cynthia, Bruce, how about we go another 15 minutes here? We take calls, if you two can handle that. And let's take some calls and see what some people have to say. Would you like to do that? I know you got jet lag.
I will, but if you have some callers, I will.
Okay, here's the number, folks, if you want to call in. It's 816-399-4701. That's 816-399-4701. I'll give it out one more time. 816-399-4701. If you got any questions for Cynthia McKinney or Bruce Campbell, either one, fire them up right now, and I'll let you pick the mic back up, Cynthia or Bruce. We'll see if we gain calls.
Well, it's always good to have callers, I think. Kind of spices it up. Never know what you're going to hear.
Okay, I'm just looking at the internet now, and here's a report saying Malcolm X's, what is it? Malcolm X's trusted bodyguard was a government informant.
Okay, we got a caller here.
Okay.
If you want to go ahead and address that Malcolm X issue, go ahead.
Well, the only thing I was going to say is that is what the FBI excelled at, infiltrating social movements and placing their people at the highest levels inside those social movements and neutralizing the leadership of those social movements.
I give credit, once again, the black community. What was it? We got two calls. Now, callers, hold on a moment. I give credit to Martin Luther King and everybody back during the 60s. If it hadn't been for them, we could not sue the government under the Title 42, 1983. It was actually 1960-something at the time. Gave us our civil rights, redress of grievances. We never had that. And it was Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, because of the movement back then, that put it into effect. That's one of the things that got Kennedy killed, among others. But Johnson was forced to sign it, even though he really didn't want to sign it. So it's black America, folks. And they're in the streets now saying no more of this. They got guts. I don't see the white people out there with them. Very few are out there. I see them on the keyboards and with the mouse in the hand at the computer, passing all kinds of disinformation. But it's time we get out there and say, hey, enough's enough.
Enough is enough.
Now, we've got two callers here. The first one, we've got, Remick. I'm seeing a Remick. Are you there?
Hey, Remick, is that who I am? Hi, Stu.
She's a good person. This is Remick. Very good person. Very patriotic.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, Cynthia. Hello, Bruce.
Hello, Remick.
Hear from you.
Yeah, great. I'm glad I could get on. I don't have a question. I got tears in my eyes earlier. I just wanted to commend all of you for such a class act with this show. It's great to listen to everything that you all covered. It's inspiring, and I'm privileged to hear it, and I just wanted to say yay, good for you all, and thank you so much for speaking so much truth and coming together. I think these discussions are so important. I know that since my wake-up process began and I started looking at so many issues, I realized recently how even thinking that I was on a path finding truth, I was actually being herded, and somewhat controlled in that journey and manipulated. And when you wake up to that, it's a very devastating feeling, to feel that sense of violation or betrayal, that you had hope in something, you put your confidence in someone who was pitching something that sounded appealing and started to ring true. And it's like Cynthia described peeling back the layers of the onion earlier, and sometimes I can get into a state of despair over the confusion. And how do we come together, in groups of people, when they've got every angle on how to undermine it down with, provocateurs or, even these street movements, they've got bad guys in there. Yeah. And I don't need to go on about that. I mean, I love that you brought up COINTELPRO again in detail. I mean, people throw the word around a lot, but I don't know that enough of us have actually scrutinized the information and realized the extent of its permeation. And I don't want to go on, but I think these discussions are important. A chorus of voices, like the 3-hour broadcast the network did recently, had 6 people weighing in with opinions and experiences, and everyone jived together just fine. So kudos to all of you. I think these discussions are important rather than just, swallowing what's presented and delivered on the internet with your favorite mainstream or alternative media source, So just thank you so much. I'm proud of all of you, and I'll let the next caller have some time.
Thanks, Remick.
All right.
That was great. Thank you, Remick.
We're here. Go ahead.
Well, hello. Thank you. I'm just tuning in a few minutes ago, and I'm very familiar with you and Cynthia as well. And I do, like the previous caller, just want to compliment you and thank you for being there and highlighting all these issues that we never get on the mainstream media. And for sure, as far as resolving the dilemma our country is in, it's got to be a manifold approach. And, of course, you discuss all this over time. Getting back lawful money is key to it all. That is the primary method in which they control our government and then the rest of our country. And so we need to get lawful money back that's debt-free, so that we can, and we should tell these banking cartel, the Rothschild, Rockefellers, that we don't owe them a penny. All the trillions that they claim we owe them due to our traders in our government borrowing that debt-based currency and then promising to pay the daily compounded insurance on top of interest on top of that loan, which is clearly high-level loan sharking. That's all it really is. So all of that should be just waived and say, we don't owe you a penny, like was Iceland did a couple years ago, and hopefully maybe Greece is going to be soon doing. And we need to do that as well and get lawful currency back. But, the American people generally still not even aware of this situation with our currency and the counterfeit money supply, and that silver and gold is the real American money up till 1930s and 1960s. And so, I always would love to see somehow if we can gain control over Hollywood and some of the stations on the boob tube, so that real education, instead of the brainwashing and programming that they're using that medium for on the public, real education on this topic and all the others could be then reaching the mass of the sheeple out there so they could quickly come up to speed with what's going on. I'm also looking at alternative energy sources, and which is another key for making us independent and free again. And also, I just don't see ultimately how we're going to turn the tables on these guys unless our military is woken up and is brought back home and defends our country here within our borders, seals the borders down, as well as helps us arrest this domestic enemy and traitors that are operating out of and nesting in Washington, D.C. and many of our state capitals.
Well, yes, I absolutely agree with what the caller just said as well. And, you know, the Federal Reserve, I've
Alert
often
from Sky.
said we just need to walk away. Just walk away. And, you know, I've tried to interest myself in, you know, becoming a gold bug, but there's the other part of that the same people control the gold mines. So you're not really necessarily freeing yourself. You know, I would have to read a little bit more from some more free-thinking economists on how we would actually free ourselves. But clearly, the Federal Reserve is the first step.
I recommend Bill Still's The Secret of Oz, O-Z.
Oh,
The
yes,
best
I've
one.
seen that. Oh, yes.
It's really good.
Yes, it's
You know,
very
if I may, Cynthia and Stu, if I may just say on that you're right, and they can control that if they're, you know, if they're enabled to. But gold has always been, you know, rich man's money. Back in the day, the average American didn't have much gold in his pocket, gold coins, maybe a 10th ounce, you know, quarter ounce maybe, but silver. You see, but under the Constitution, it's a silver dollar. That's the common currency. And
Okay.
that's the way to go. And then, you know, as mines are coming about and you can make more strikes and mint it, that's all great. And but it should be silver, and even, you know, at the same time, like Lincoln did, just greenbacks, where
Yes.
it's just printed by our Treasury, debt-free, released into circulation with limited printing so it doesn't inflate, and that would be a great transition as well.
Yes, and
Yeah.
in fact, that's what Ellen Brown recommends. And when I read her book, the Web of Debt, I couldn't put it down. I read that book in like 2 days, and it's like what 400 pages, 300 pages or so.
That was the only good thing Lincoln ever did, was come up with that debt-free currency, but he used it for an evil purpose, unfortunately.
I have the solution.
Yes, yep. Well, I'm sorry. I don't want to keep jumping in while you're saying anything. But yes, I agree. And but that's for our strategy. I mean, that is the root of our problems right there. First, they control the money supply. Then, eventually, they control everything. Of course, right?
Yes,
because when you
that's
own
right.
the money, when you make it and you print it out in your own house, you know, you're printing it out and you're distributing it. Therefore, ultimately, yeah, and you're owning everything. And what's really incredible about that racket they have going is that it's worthless paper backed by nothing, and with it, they've made actual purchases of real wealth, property, physical property,
Yes.
businesses, etc. Right.
Yes,
We
and
had to pay for it. We had to pay for every dime of it.
that's
They've
right.
stolen
Yes.
us, robbed and looted this country.
That's right.
All we need is justice, a true attorney general who will really prosecute those that have done this to this country, this mob. It's the Jewish mob and the Bush crime syndicate. And if we put a halt to it and put them in jail and confiscate everything they have, there could be $100 to $200 trillion, 100 in real estate alone in the U.S. Think of what that would do. If we put that to any American, it would start, and all the businesses that they've taken over, confiscate all the businesses and sell them back to the American people and put the wealth back to the people, the businesses. A whole economy would start over in a period of time. And think of the coffers of the states as well, and the coffers of the Treasury, U.S. Treasury. we wouldn't have income tax for what, 10, maybe 15 years? All we have to do is go after 12 men, and there's about 1,000 directly underneath them that are responsible for this that have never been brought to justice. Economic plunder in the United States under federal law is the death penalty, in case if anybody does not know that.
Yes, actually, right in the Constitution, since a lawful United States dollar is so many grains of silver, and I believe it's 370, and or it's around there at least, and anybody tampering with that, it's the death penalty. And so obviously, boy, they've been skirting that one for the last 100 years, and it's a shame because that's exactly right, Stu. That's what needs to be done. But I don't see somebody coming up like that, like an attorney general that's capable of doing that, unless the military surrounding him or her and protecting these people from any kind of assassination attempts, because obviously that's what's going to come their way. And but this is exactly what needs to be done. And I agree. We can easily recognize the turnaround our country would have, going back in the right direction of productivity, entrepreneurial activity, freedom again. Not only income tax, but no property tax either. And property owners were the only ones allowed to vote. The founding fathers really had a great vision for securing the well-being of the country, because if only property owners were voting, we wouldn't be in this mess right now, because no property owners would vote for school taxes or property taxes, number one. Or any politician that's going to undermine their ability to own that property and pass it on to their descendants.
Excellent point. Gene Chip Tatum, you're on with us. Did you have something to say? Okay. You want to add anything, Gene, at all?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we absolutely need to become more aware. And, even in our circles, when we're not, we're just doing what we do, we still need to, have ways of identifying folk and protecting ourselves. So that's necessary. The caller, I also wanted to respond to the caller when he was talking about the role of the military. That's why I reached out to, I think his name is Stuart Rhodes, who is the founder of Oath Keepers. I think Oath Keepers is such an important organization because, if the military, members of the military say no, then that's way powerful. That is way powerful. And we need them. Unfortunately, we need the critical mass built up on the outside, but we need a growing critical mass on the inside of these law enforcement and military organizations, so that people are not willing to break the law, or more importantly, break their consciences by obeying an order.
Good point, Cynthia.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And you know, it is so critical if we can only get our military to get to that point of understanding and awareness as well as action, because they are our muscle, and we're relying on them, and it's not coincidence that they're all abroad in all these other countries, so they can't be here observing what's happening to us at home, and then realizing, hey, let's stand up for the people, and then of course we'll be right alongside of them with gun in hand.
There was a questionnaire done by the military, written at the Naval Postgraduate School, and it was asked of Marines and Army. There were like 45 questions, and most of them had to do with international control of the military. Would you go along with a foreigner as your superior officer, that kind of thing, variations on that. But question number 45 was, law has been passed to outlaw firearms. Some Americans would not obey this law. Would you be willing to fire on these Americans? And about 40% of those questions said they would. 60%, it's roughly there. 60% said they would not. So that 60%, I would say, is our base. And it may be worse now. I don't know. It may be better. Maybe a higher percentage saying they wouldn't. But I think a lot of the military has been suspected and maybe shown to be disloyal to this horrible ruling clique, the Council on Foreign Relations and the people above them and below them. So I think we've got to concentrate. I agree with Caller and I agree with Cynthia that we've got to get the military on our side, at least the loyal part of it, and they've got to deal with the disloyal ones in the military.
And I might
That's a great point.
I might add the reason that we started Veterans Truth Radio and Veterans Truth Network is because I'm ex-Marine and others, Gene Chip Tatum, ex-military, and we did this for a reason, and that's to try to not only unite the patriot community out here, but the ex-veterans. Because, look, we have the largest standing army in the world of 100 million Americans locked and loaded to defend this country. We have a tremendous amount of those that are military that can defend this country, ex-military that is, if we were ever invaded. Within domestic enemies or outside enemies, either one. And we could defend this country. And that's what we need to do, if necessary.
Stuart, here's the other thing that I don't have anything except anecdotal information. But I've read where, like Canada, for example, basically kicked the U.S. military out because the U.S. military was trying to recruit their First Nations people to join the U.S. military. So they go up to Canada and go on a reservation of First Nations people. Those are the indigenous people in Canada. And they try to encourage them to come and serve in the U.S. military. And I'm wondering, okay, how many of the newly admitted and the immigrant community that's been here for a while, with the deteriorating economy, how many are going to find themselves in the military? And what does that do for those numbers? I mean, the numbers that you just pointed out from the poll, but, what does that portend for us as well? So
the point I was making is there's a lot of ex-military out here, and we're all tired of what's going on. And we will defend this country if necessary. We were trained to do that. And if necessary, that day may come. Gene Chip Tatum and I kind of got a joke between us. And Gene, the caller couldn't hear you because you're going to have to hook up another way. if you want to comment on this, but Tatum and I got an attitude. It's like maybe a bunch of us need to go waterboard in this Illuminati 12.
There you go. That's the start.
That's the start.
Hey, and you know, if I may say, and you know, it's a pleasure to speak with all of you because you're all clearly thinking, and it's a chess game. This is a big chess game, and that's right. They know our military. They got to take it over and make sure there's no real patriots left in it anymore, and that's exactly what we're contending with here. And we can expect that they're going to dilute it to the point where it won't be Americans in our military. And so when that day comes and they're knocking on our door, and I'm going to look at them and say, well, I see you're wearing my American uniform here, but you're sure not one of us, so I'm not listening to you. I don't give a crap I don't give a hoot about what you got to say, and you better get off my property real quick. And that's how we'll handle those guys, because there'll be foreigners for sure that are going to try to make a move on. It's not the real Americans in the military. And, you know, this also ties in with, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I'm sure you already covered this. I got on board late. But with the Baltimore incident, and when the mayor down there said that the sheriff had to stand down, law enforcement had to stand down and let rioters have their way for a bit. Now, at that point, the law enforcement should have said, we are not standing down to that order, and or rather, we're not following that order. We're standing down, and we shall arrest whoever these rioters are and then interrogate them to find out if they're locals or if they're imported provocateurs. And once we determine that they're imported provocateurs, then we're going to waterboard them and find out who sent them, who's funding them, and then we could blow the lid off all this right from that approach and show that these domestic enemies and foreign agents controlling our government are conspiring to undermine through chaos and mayhem the fabric of our country so that they can just drag us into this United Nations global crap.
But now you remember up in Canada, that's exactly what happened. That there was a peaceful march, and all of a sudden there's an incident, a violent, provocative incident, and they later discovered was that the guys that did the incident were wearing the same shoes as the police officers. So they were the infiltrators.
You can go right here in the United States, Cynthia, at Kent State. The building that was set on fire wasn't set on fire by the students. It was set on fire by off-duty police, just as provocateurs.
Yeah. Okay, Gene, I don't think you go on the network because of the way you're hooked up here. Someone had commented a minute ago, but
I heard it.
Okay, maybe you can repeat it.
Well,
what you said there.
No, I can't hear you.
Well, it's very telling that they do not pursue whoever these people are that are perpetrating the violent acts. You never hear them getting arrested and interrogated and getting their backgrounds. That is very telling how much of an inside orchestrated event that these really are.
And a similar situation occurred when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had the nonviolent march in Memphis the first time that ended up being very violent. And now I've seen photographs of cars that had Illinois license plates. So there were people who were not local who were there. They, smashed a few windows. And then that forced Dr. King to have to go back to Memphis the second time. And of course, that was, the setup for the assassination. But it all began, it was decided, there's a whole lot of stuff going on, and, the people inside Dr. King's own entourage, not only the entourage, but the trusted 10 or 12 guys, they themselves had been infiltrated as well. And I don't know how much you guys know about that, but William Pepper writes the whole story out in his books, and it's available on the internet. Actually, if you go to thekingcenter.org, you can get the whole trial transcript from the 1999 trial and see how there were these provocateurs that had come in and created the havoc so that Dr. King would come back the second time and be killed.
Could I ask a question whether you would want to address this issue or not, Cynthia? We spoke about Maxine Waters. Do you want to even touch that?
Well, the only thing is I'm hesitant to touch it because it was something that she said to me, and I don't know that she has said that publicly, but I would just put it this way, that she experienced what she would, I think she considered a direct threat when she was investigating the CIA crack cocaine thing. And then, of course, we know what happened to Gary Webb. I tried to hire Gary Webb to get him to come to Washington and do some investigations I was looking at like the vaccines that they give the soldiers, and they're just a whole bunch of sweetheart deals that were corrupt, basically, and investigated a seasoned, fearless investigative journalist like Gary Webb is the kind of person that you need on Capitol Hill to just weed out some of this stuff so that it can stop. But right now, I mean, it's just grand theft. What's that game that the kids play, grand theft larceny or whatever, grand theft? Because that's what's going on. It's just a big stealing ring that's going on, and it's a closed circle. The economy is closed. If you don't have money, you'll never have money. The politics is closed. If you have no political influence, you'll never have political influence, and that all of that needs to stop.
And we have Gene Chip Tatum. Thank you for addressing that, Gene Chip Tatum. And you were heard last time, Gene. But if it wasn't for Gene Chip Tatum, and if it wasn't for Terry Reid and Mike Rupert, nobody would ever known back in the 1990s, and Maxine Waters wouldn't have been up there on the hill hollering and screaming about it. And that's what got Gary Webb later killed, murdered.
And he wasn't the only one, because now remember, when that report came out, the CIA was forced to do a report, and the chief of staff of the intelligence committee ended up in a hotel room dead. I can't remember his name right now, but shortly after that, if you think about it, everybody who had something to do with that is now dead. Think about it.
Yeah, it's like Mena, Arkansas, with the Clintons, Bushes, and Ollie North, and General John Singlaub, and General Richard Secord, and the whole gang, Bill and Hillary, right in the middle of it. And all the drugs and the guns, and there's about 300 body count, I believe, is what the official number is, of all the whistleblowers and those that witness things. And yet these people are running for president of the United States.
I don't know if among that body count is included folk that were working in the White House that had direct access to the paperwork. It was John, what was his name? Mills. John Mills, who was the chief of staff of the intelligence committee, found dead in a hotel.
Well, I know there's tons and tons and tons of dead people. And Gene Chip Tatum, you're there. Tell Cynthia McKinney what you did about the delivery of cocaine to Bill Clinton.
Well, before even that, there were 6 witnesses who were to testify before that committee, killed within a week of the date of their testimony. So, are killed or died on an operating table for voluntary surgery. So, and those were prime witnesses who could have brought down some very powerful people.
Now, Gene, tell them the story real quick about Arkansas, because it's, there's all these rumors out there that the Clintons weren't involved. I've had Larry Nichols on here. You were aware of things.
If the Clintons weren't involved, I was a pilot down in Honduras during the Contra times. I was flying had three flags I flew for. I flew for the United States Army as a medevac pilot. I flew for Wally World, which fell under the National Reconnaissance Office, and I flew for Pegasus, which fell directly under the White House. We had various missions. Some of those missions went into Contra camps, went across into Nicaragua, where we witnessed the manufacturing of cocaine. In earlier years, that was in 85 and 86. In earlier years, 83, just around the time of the Grenada invasion that we were involved in, I was with the Task Force 160, which is 160th Aviation, a pilot for them. We would fly cross-country to various places, various cities, and one of the cities we flew to, carrying a cooler, was Little Rock Air Force Base. We were met at Little Rock Air Force Base by a limousine. Out of the limousine, a man approached us. His name was Dr. Stevens. That's the name that was on the cooler, and he gave us the pleasure of getting to meet the governor, William Jefferson Clinton. And I later found out that Roger Clinton was Jackson Stevens' driver, his chauffeur. So they had the whole gang in there. What we delivered, I don't let anything in my aircraft without opening it and seeing what's in it. And there were several kilos of cocaine and a lot of money. I called my boss in Washington, and I told him, and he told me, don't worry about it. Just do what you're supposed to do.
Mm.
That was for their little private party they were going to have, right? Tell them what Roger told the DEA.
Roger, during the investigation of Roger Clinton, who was charged with distribution of cocaine, and later he was let loose under the orders of his brother. His brother pardoned him as the governor. There's a DEA tape that we heard that of Roger calling in to his one of his suppliers and getting an order of cocaine for Mr. Stevens. Mr. Stevens was known to have this habit and liking cocaine, and he had plenty of money. He made his order and he hung up, and about 10 minutes later he called back, and this is all under DEA tapes. And he said, "Hey, listen, I need to get a little more because my brother, he's coming to the party and he's got a nose like a vacuum cleaner."
Mm.
Mr. Stevens was Jackson Stevens, who was BCCI money laundering for that whole group, which tied up into the Keating lawsuit that put him in jail.
Mm-hmm.
And all the stuff. But Jackson Stevens, Hillary was the first one to represent Stevens in the SEC suit that they filed. I have those documents, by the way, under BCCI right on the front of my website, stewwebb.com. But I want you to tell them who, when I got crushed, Cynthia, in 2011, third time, second vehicle, 60 miles an hour, boom, boom on the left side, trying to run me into a pillar, was Jay Stevens of Stevens Truck Driving School. He's a cousin to Jackson Stevens. And what does he do? Gene, do you want to mention that, or?
Well, those tractor trailers were used to transport, and it's on record, those transportation of drugs across the United States.
Well,
I might add to that, Cynthia. Here the guy is. Jackson Stevens' cousin, Jay Stevens, tries to take me out in 2011 in November. Got the FBI trying to take me out in two previous accidents, or the previous one. Then I got a second one where they ran me in the ass end, at 20 miles an hour. And that was done by Orion Investigations, who runs another one, Charles Stevens, I believe to be a relative. Orion investigations. It was on me in 1990 for causing congressional investigation. It was just stalking me to death. But Stevens, when I turned him into the IRS Silverado in 1990 and turned in Neil Bush and Melman, my ex-in-law that owned the place and all that other stuff, I had an IRS agent call me up. And she says, Stu, I'm with the IRS out here in Bannister in Kansas City. I said, Bannister Road. I said, yeah, 95th. And she says, I'm doing an investigation based on your, turning in 750 companies and 116 individuals involved in this organized crime. But I have a question. You ever heard of Jay Stevens, truck driving school? I said, no, not really. She says, we're trying to figure out why they got millions of dollars in Silverado banks. And they couldn't figure it out. Well, later, she comes back to me and says, they fired me. I said, what? They fired me. Stu, who do you got in the media here? And I said, well, TV5's been friendly to me. So we got that piece. She had found out it was drugs and drug hauling. And we got that piece done on TV5 here. It was either Stan Kramer or Stan Carmack in Kansas City, Missouri did the piece. But she had gotten fired. Then they tried to take her out 1 year later in the exact location. They blew with blasting caps, tires of mine, on a vehicle in 1991. Danny Casolaro got killed 2 days later. What was he doing? Writing a book about the octopus. Where was he at? At a good friend's house, Bill McCoy, former Inspector General or Assistant Inspector General of the Pentagon that had retired, former CIA spook. It was a good guy. It was helping everybody. And Gene Chip Tatum was dealing with him back in the 90s. I was, mid-90s. Terry Reid was. Larry Nichols was. Tons of whistleblowers. He was a PI for everybody. And was acting so. But they ended up killing him over Oklahoma City bombing. You got anything to add to that, Gene?
No. Other than I spoke to him Thursday, and he said, Chip, listen, there's been somebody scoping my house out. I'm going to tell you now I'm not suicidal. And the following Monday, I heard that he was found dead.
Which one was this?
Bill McCoy.
Yeah. That was in 1997. 1997, because of his investigation of Oklahoma City. And him and Terry Reid finding, mainly Bill, finding the Strassmeyer connection, the BDF to Oklahoma City. And of course, Strassmeyer's father was CIA, German intelligence folks. But the Israeli Mossad was all over the place, and so was Daddy Bush. And it was all to deal with Oklahoma City, with the Clinton records that were all moved out of Arkansas, Little Rock, that all got stuffed in that building. Savings and loan records, HUD records, and other records that they wanted destroyed. And what was amazing was after they blew the building, they pulled Ryder trucks up there for the next 12 hours as they moved everybody back. And they filled these Ryder trucks with all the documents they put in there to blow up that didn't blow up. And then they turned around and took them to the dump. Then they started getting bodies out of the place. And that's on videotape by a camera person down there at one of the local TV stations that was filming it. But we could talk about all this crazy stuff all day long, but we need to do a consensus. We all need to come together. We need to figure out how the American people, like Cynthia said, from the right wing to the left wing, and we're all Americans. I don't consider people right wing or left wing. I think George Herbert Walker Bush made it up when he was snorting some cocaine or shoving heroin in his veins. And he was on an airplane, he's looking out one wing and the other, and he came up with the idea, right wing, left wing. We're all Americans. We need to unite together, and we need to stop organized crime in America, jail them, and get everything back they've stolen before they kill half of America with a war. Any last words, Cynthia? Bruce? Gene?
No, I just say we really need to come together again, because we really just scratched the surface and left still a lot unsaid and and I'd like to come back and take some more calls too. So anyway, it's been very good, and I appreciate Gene and Bruce, the callers, and you, Stu, for bringing us all together.
Well, I thank you, and it's always my honor to have you on, Cynthia. And Bruce, you got any last words?
No, you about said it all. I appreciate everything you said, everybody, and I'm happy to do it again anytime.
Okay, and Gene, any last word?
Nope, just tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, folks. That's the way it is. We're going to talk about who is Patricia Geller. Look a little background information on the person that instigated the killings last night. So we'll talk about her.
Now, you're talking about the Texas killings now, this big orchestrated event. You're going to be doing heavy coverage on this tomorrow night.
Well, 1 hour worth of heavy coverage. That's right.
Hang on to your hats, folks. That's Gene Chip Tatum on Tuesday night, on Tuesday nights. And I think,
gentlemen and Cynthia, may I just make a closing comment?
yes.
Well, thank you. Again, I want to say God bless all of you, number one, and may He keep you in His protection always. And I also want to just remind everybody on the drug dealing going on, that Geraldo Rivera interview with Marines in Afghanistan a few years back, where we're protecting the opium trade and bringing the heroin right over here. So nothing's changed. They're still doing it, and they're destroying our young men and women here in our own streets with that poison, that devil poison. And so I just wanted to just mention that, and thank you all. And last, I'd like to just say, may God bless the constitutional republic forever, and to hell with all traitors and foreign agents, and hang them high and hang them fast.
Thank you, caller. It's much appreciated. And folks, I just want to remind you, and I thank you, Cynthia, Gene, and Bruce Campbell, and our caller here. I just want to remind you, folks, we have a contribution fund going, and we're only shy $3,300, and someone's going to match the other $5,000 once we hit $5,000. We have about 22 days, I think, to go on this, and it will give us everything we need for all of our hosts to be able to bring you TV as well as the radio and more secure servers that will be set up around the world to ensure that we don't have these cyber terrorist attacks that I've had in the past. We are getting very secure, but I'm just asking everybody to contribute if they can. Let's get the 3,300 together. And once again,